What's it like using the OM3 with the other lenses that Olympus has? Because Olympus OM system has a lot of different lenses, and I've actually got about half of them. Let's go in the studio and take a look. My background was at the time the Olympus lens system, and the system has expanded a little bit, which means that I need to reprint my background because a couple that need to be put on there. Which is a great thing, actually. This camera, and we'll start with this lens because this is kind of one that, or I should say the factor that a lot of people talk about, you know, this camera doesn't have a battery grip on it, or it doesn't have a grip on it. Not like an OM1 does. An OM1 has a grip on it. It's a retro camera, guys, okay? If you don't like the fact that it doesn't have a grip, well then buy a camera like an OM1. It's the exact same camera, at least the Mark II is, just has a grip on it. And if you don't like this look and you want a retro look, this is the way retro cameras are. They don't have grips on them. Now, okay, this lens right here. This is a variable length lens, okay? It's a telescoping lens, or telescoping is that how they call it? And it's also a variable aperture lens. And because its point of gravity, its point of mass, okay, changes a lot as you change focal lengths. And when you're doing wildlife photography, or especially birds, you'll be doing this a lot. That means that, like, its change in position or change in the way you kind of handle the thing, it requires you to kind of have a second way of holding on to it, which is the camera itself, all right? And that's kind of the only time and the only situation of all of my lenses that I have where I really kind of find myself needing kind of something with a battery grip. I'm actually going to put the OM1. This one has a battery grip on it as well to kind of illustrate something. And with this guy, I mean, I can flip this thing out and like hold it like this and take pictures, okay? Because it's pretty substantial. With the OM3, you can't quite do that. And really though, like if you're doing this kind of photography, you know, you kind of aren't really going to be concerned about the retro look. That being said though, like this camera has all the different capabilities, all the different pro capture capabilities, all the different focusing systems that are AI generated, I guess they call it now, that like the OM1 and the OM1 Mark II have. So you can do it, you're just going to be handicapped a little bit from an ergonomic standpoint, simply because this thing doesn't have like a really good way of gripping something big and long like this, especially if it's something that changes in length and therefore changes center of mass quite a bit throughout its use and range. And one other thing, okay, a telescoping lens that is also a variable aperture lens should never be compared to a lens like this is the 40 to 150 f2.8. This doesn't telescope, this is a constant aperture lens. This lens is on a different par than this one is. You do not cross compare these two, and I see people doing that across different brands. They'll compare a telescoping lens to a non-telescoping lens and then criticize one or the other for the price, or maybe they'll criticize one or the other for the speed or the weight or something like that. And you should not ever cross compare the two, okay? It's the difference between a Porsche and a Prius. Both of them are going to get you to church, but you don't compare them. Okay, so let's move on to the next lens here, which I think is a good one to talk about, because this I think is actually kind of a good fit for this camera. This is the 40 to 150 f2.8, and I mean it's nice. I think this is a pretty well balanced system. Of course, it's not a telescoping lens, so it's not changing its center of mass very much. And with this tripod collar on here, I find myself handling, controlling, and maneuvering the camera almost entirely at this point. You know, everything's kind of ball pivoting on this point. So I don't feel like there's too much of a performance handicap by the fact that this doesn't have a grip. Now, something else that should be noted though about this lens is that you can, in fact, remove this guy if you want to. And when you do, this lens actually takes on a very different kind of feel and characteristic. Now, like, instead of being like balanced, if you will, okay, it's very, it feels front heavy. Whereas with that thing on there, for some reason, whatever it is, and I think it's because I'm putting a lot of the weight in the palm of my hand using the foot, it kind of gets front heavy, okay? And it actually feels harder to manipulate without that on there, you know. Just my opinion, you know, you're free to argue with me on this. So, but yeah, I love this. It's so cool, but at the same time, I hear it breaks easy, but I've never had one break, so, you know. And what should we talk about next? Oh, you know what? We'll go from the long end to the short end. This is an interesting lens. This is a Rokina f2.2. It's a cinema lens, technically. It's kind of a fun lens to use, I see that in air quotes, because infinity and the aperture ring markings are all on the side of the lens. They are not on the top. And that's because this is a video-centric lens. And also, like, man, the OM3, it has some really cool video features in it, which, in my opinion, actually, like, at present, make this a better contender for video than the OM1 Mark II, which is their flagship camera. And that's simply because we have this selector dial over here and the ability to make 5 custom modes for different types of video situations. So I know we're recording on my EM1X right now, but my EM1X is going to get set aside for this particular type of photography soon by this camera, because I really like this. You know, it allows me to set and change and manipulate video much faster, and, you know, and do work ahead of time rather than doing it in the middle of a shoot, changing settings and so forth for different circumstances. So, oh yeah, and how a lens like this feels, I mean, like this lens, you can see it's got the gears here on, or the teeth, I should say, on the focusing ring instead of like actual rubber grips. So it is a very different kind of lens, but, you know, it's kind of front heavy. I would say of all of my lenses, even though the big one, this one's actually kind of the most uncomfortable to use. So let's talk or show next this guy right here. This is the 75mm f1.8, which was an insanely debated or hotly debated kind of lens when it first came out. I don't know why, because everybody who has this lens thinks it's an awesome lens. You know, wow, this is so easy to use with this camera. It balances nicely. It's really a great fit, and it's not a pro level lens, and so it goes along with a lot of their other smaller lenses. Like the design of it, even if you look at it, is a lot like their other, you know, the 25 mm f1.8 that they just redid, the 17mm, is it a 1.8 as well? Those are lenses that I don't have because I kind of do more pro level work, but I probably should get them maybe when I beat this cancer. But okay, yeah. Balance, I mean, yeah, like I said, it just feels really good. I can easily do this one-handed, and it's a nice feel and nice size for this particular camera body. Let's go next to, oh, this one actually, I probably should have talked about next to the 40 to 150, because this is also a 40 to 150. This is the Plastic Fantastic 40 to 150 f4 to f5.6, and this is a great travel lens. The only thing about it is that it's not weather sealed. However, OM System does now have a 40 to 150, I think it's a constant aperture f4, which is weather sealed, right? It's a significantly heavier duty lens, and I bet it would feel great along this camera body as well, but I don't have one to really kind of contest or tell you how it does feel. But I'll tell you what, with this lens on here, it's such a light lens because it is plastic that you almost, even with it extended, it doesn't even feel like it's there. Really a very easy one to handle with this camera for sure. Let's talk about, okay, these are the, let's get these three out. These are the Pro f1.2 lenses. I love these lenses. Not only for their great bokeh, because they all three have great bokeh, but I also love the way they feel on my EM1X and also my OM1s. You know, they felt great in the Pen F2, although the Pen F, I think they were a little too much for the Pen F. Even though it gets beautiful pictures of my kids, I don't know, it felt like a little bit too much for the Pen F. But this guy, I think that this is a much better fit. So if you use these lenses with your Pen F and you like that, you'll like the OM3 even more. And that's kind of what I can say for all three. I'm not going to throw them on here just because they all balance the same. They're all configured the same. They all feel the same. Like if you were blindfolded, you would actually have a very hard time picking out one lens from the other. All right, let's talk about this guy next, okay? This is a really cool lens. I wish you could weather seal a lens like this, but I know that from an engineering standpoint, that would be a nightmare to design this lens to be weather sealed. So this is a powered zoom, and it collapses. And when this thing is collapsed, I kid you not, I can fit this camera in my pocket. Well, not my back pocket, but like the side pockets on my cargo pants. And that's really cool. Okay. I have on here, this is it's like a shutter frame type diaphragm lens hood. It screws on here. You can buy these from China. They're delicate. They do break very easily, but you know, I just buy 5 of them at a time. You know, they're cheap, not a big deal. But this zoom on here, like I said, it doesn't even feel like there's anything there. It's a great zoom, I think, to use with it if you're okay with sidestepping the weather sealing. You know, if you're working in an environment where there is no weather sealing and you want something really compact, I think this is a really cool lens to use, especially for street photography or the kids. You know, this has been like our go-to lens for photographing the kids, and amazingly, this thing has not been broken yet, even though my 1-year-olds and 2-year-olds have gotten their hands on it quite a few times. Now, the only thing I wish this lens had was a way in camera for me to set a specific focal length that it opens up to. Because like it always opens up to the same focal length, which I think is the widest one. And a lot of times, you know, I just wish it would open up at 25 millimeters, you know. So yeah, that's kind of just one little gripe that I have with that little lens. But other than that, you know, it's sharp enough. Its autofocus is good. So let's see, have we done all of these except for this one? This is a lens that I bought this for a cruise because I wanted a weather sealed lens that was small, versatile. This is the 12 to 45 millimeter f4. And as somebody who owns 2 of the 12 to 40 f2.8s, the other one is recording this right now. I have both the OM system one and I also have the Olympus one from years ago. This lens is like half the weight of this guy, and it's also half the size. I mean, you can look at it right there. You take the length, width, and diameter, and you do the math on the volume of this lens, and it's basically half the size of this guy, which makes packing this a lot easier to do. And I gotta say that I think that with the OM3, this is a phenomenal, you know, kit lens to go along with it. You know, if you're getting into the system and you're wondering what lens should I get the f2.8 version or the f4? In my opinion, the f4 is phenomenal. I really love this lens. This lens has been getting used more and more and more as I've kind of gotten to know it. It would be my video lens if I didn't need it as a prop so much. Because it's got just a little bit more range than the 12 to 40 millimeter f2.8. And the fact that it's, you know, one stop slower with today's ISO performance of this new sensor, I just don't think I need that extra stop. I can put this thing at 50,000 ISO and it's not a problem, especially if I use like noise, AI noise removal. So yeah. It's a lens that I didn't think, you know, when this came out, I was kind of skeptical. I was like, who would need that? And now it's one of my favorites. So yeah, let's do this guy. You know, this for a long time, this was the mainstay in the Olympus portfolio, now the OM system portfolio. This is the 12 to 40. And I'll tell you right now that it's kind of a lens that when you sit it on here, this guy does not sit flat on the table because it's kind of bigger diameter than the actual lens bayonet mount height allows. But, you know, like it does, there's one nice thing I can say about it is that if you're a fan of using manual controls, maybe manually focusing and so forth, and zooming in and out a lot, and also you need this function button, it's a great upgrade over the 12 to 45 for those things. Also, when used as this camera, it does have a great feel for its controls, okay? They kind of stick out a little bit further, and so for an experienced photographer, this is kind of more of a lens for you. You know, if you're using more auto options, then, you know, this guy here, or the 12 to 45 are kind of more your thing, which I know for taking pictures of my kids, auto everything, because, you know, stuff changes so fast. I can't keep up with it. All right, let's see here. Next, oh, you know what? I can't miss this guy here. This is the 60mm f2.8 macro. And I know OM system has kind of been getting more into the macro phase of things, which is great because it seems like all the other manufacturers have kind of forgotten about macro photography. The new 90mm, was it f4, I think? That looks like a great lens. And by the way, the tripod collar off this 40 to 150 f2.8, it fits on that macro. But this guy right here, so using it, handling it, it's very easy to handle this lens with just one hand with this camera. And another really cool thing about this camera is that it has the processor the OM1 and the OM1 Mark II have. Now, it doesn't have the buffer size, but you don't need the buffer to do focus stacking with this camera, at least in the cases that I've used it, all right? So if you're interested in kind of getting into macro photography, I think that this is really a kind of a nice way to do it if you want a retro looking camera that you can kind of use for other things, but at the same time you also don't want to spend as much as an OM1 Mark II costs. I know like I said, I think the only things that you lose, well, we'll cover that when I do a review. But yeah, like I said, very good handling lens with this type of camera. The focusing ring is kind of out further from the lens, which does, you know, it keeps your hands from getting too cramped, so to speak. I don't have any of the really small lenses that Olympus makes. I know I should get a few of them. You know, this little pancake zoom here is kind of the only one that I have. Next up is this guy, and this guy, he's a beast. He's big. This is the 7 to 14 f2.8, which, you know, there's one of those things that we could like complain about with the system, okay? And that's that there aren't very many wide-angle lenses in the 4/3 system, which there's kind of two reasons for that. Number one, other manufacturers haven't developed very many lenses for them. And the ones who have, all they've done is taken APS-C size sensor lenses and just stuck the 4/3 bayonet mount on there and called it a 4/3 lens. The problem with that is that it means that the very wide end of things, we don't have very many options. This guy, along with the new 8 to 25, these are kind of really your only options as far as like getting a rectilinear lens, and their zooms. And this guy, he's kind of big. And some people have reported that it's not a very sharp lens. I'm an astrophotographer, and I'm a bit of a snob when it comes to optics, and I don't know, I think this guy's pretty sharp. Like the astrophotos that I've taken with it, the stars look pretty good. So it might be variances from, you know, production lot to production lot that they're seeing, a slight difference, but my experience with the lens has been that it's really good. Now, how does it perform on the OM3? I tell you what, it's a lot of lens off there for a wide angle zoom. And it's a constant, it doesn't change telescope at all, so its balance stays the same. So it is kind of quick and easy to use. It is heavier, and you're going to feel it. All right, that's something to keep in mind. And I will say this, that because it's pretty front heavy, because of this big piece of glass on the front, you know, it is harder to, like, you can even see my hands it's tilting naturally because of the weight of it. So that's just kind of something to keep in mind. I would say that the 8-25 would probably be a better option with a camera like this. Although I don't have the lens, I wish I did, so I could kind of give you a more experienced opinion on that one. You know, I do have a donate link down at the bottom, by the way, if you want to send me glass. Actually, don't use that thing. Oh my goodness, YouTube takes so much of it. I think it's like over a third they take. So this right here is the 8mm f1.8, which is pretty fast, fisheye, okay? And you can, in software in the camera, make this a rectilinear. It kind of crops it just slightly, and then it fixes the fisheye effect in the camera, which is actually really cool because you can kind of use it for both things. But I wouldn't in any way say that this is a replacement for a rectilinear lens where all lines are straight on a horizontal plane, simply because when you do that with a lens like this, when you digitally correct, you do lose a little bit of resolution, because some of the pixels, especially on the outside edges of the frame, have to be stretched, so to speak, in order to get those lines straight and horizontal when you have the camera held parallel to whatever it is you're imaging. But how does it feel? I mean, oh, this is a great feeling lens for this camera. It's a really nice match, and I imagine that, like, you know, a lot of the other smaller lenses that I don't have, like the 45mm f1.8, the 25mm f1.8, the 17mm f1.8, the 12mm f2, I bet those are all great feeling lenses to go along with a camera like this. But, you know, I kind of have always gravitated more to pro level glass, just because I tend to do harder work. So there you go. There's like all of my glass and kind of like how I feel that it handles on the camera. And hopefully I've covered some things that I know I haven't heard any other channels talk about yet. And then there's this guy here, which has the 4/3 sensor in it. It's the same sensor as my Pen F. Man, I wish I could get these lenses on this thing. But unfortunately, there's no way to do it because the back focus is too far off. All right, so hey, stick around for more. I'm going to do a review on this guy. It's coming.